The relentless training begins. The training grounds of the alien city were alive with energy. Massive stone walls circled the arena, their dark surface glowing with strange symbols that pulsed like veins of light. Alien warriors filled the stands, their tall figures shining in silver armor, their strange eyes fixed on the scene below. They had gathered for one reason: to watch the human train under the command of his alien wife. The human's chest rose and fell heavily, sweat rolling down his forehead. His muscles ached, and his arms felt like lead. But he did not stop. He could not stop, because in front of him stood his wife, tall and fierce, her eyes glowing with challenge. "You're slowing down already, human," she said, her voice sharp but not unkind. Her tone was half mocking, half demanding. "You're tired after only 5 rounds? We are only at 6. The human clenched his jaw and tightened his fists. He wanted to speak back, to say that no normal body could take this much punishment, but he stayed silent, because he knew that answering would only waste energy. And energy was something he needed more than anything right now. The drills were brutal, designed to break even the strongest alien warriors. First, he had fought 3 opponents back-to-back, their blades flashing under the arena lights. Second, he had carried massive stones across the arena floor until his legs nearly buckled. Third, he had been forced to dodge speeding energy orbs launched at him from all directions. Fourth, he had endured endless sparring with his wife, her strength like a mountain compared to his human body. And fifth, he had run the circular track with a heavy chain wrapped around his chest, each step like fire burning in his lungs. Now came the 6th round. The crowd leaned forward in suspense, their voices whispering. "No human will last this long," one said. "He will collapse soon," another muttered. "He was foolish to marry her," laughed a third. But others stayed quiet, their eyes sharp, as if they sensed something different about this fragile-looking man. The human looked up at his wife. Her long hair shimmered like molten silver in the arena light, her alien features sharp and beautiful. She carried herself like a queen, proud and merciless. But behind her glowing eyes, he thought he saw something else, something like hope. She wanted him to endure, not just for her pride, but because his survival meant their bond was real. The human wiped sweat from his face. His arms shook, his legs trembled, and his breathing came ragged. Still, he stepped forward into the center of the arena. The alien wife's lips curved into a small smile, both proud and daring. "You will continue," she said, her voice echoing across the stone walls. "Show them, my human, show them what you are made of." The 6th round began. From a far side of the arena, massive training machines awakened. Their heavy iron bodies creaked as gears turned. 3 towering constructs, shaped like armored beasts, began to march toward him. Their glowing eyes locked onto the human. Each step shook the ground like thunder. The crowd roared with excitement. This was a trial many alien warriors themselves failed. Facing 3 machines alone after 5 exhausting rounds was nearly suicide. The human felt his stomach twist, but his wife's words rang in his ears. "Show them what you are made of." His fists clenched tighter. He could barely lift his arms, but he raised them anyway. The first machine charged, swinging a massive steel arm toward him. He ducked, barely in time, the wind of the strike brushing his face. He stumbled, but did not fall. The crowd gasped, surprised he had avoided it at all. The second machine swung from the other side. This time he rolled across the dusty floor, pain shooting through his side. But when he stood, his wife's smirk grew wider. She crossed her arms, as if saying silently, "Yes, that's it." The human's vision blurred from sweat and exhaustion. But deep inside him, a fire burned brighter. He was not here only to survive. He was here to prove that humanity was more than weakness, more than fragility. He was here to prove that love between 2 different worlds could forge strength greater than steel. Another machine lunged, its claws slamming into the ground inches from his body. The human roared, a sound raw and filled with fury. He swung his fist against the glowing eye of the beast. Pain shot through his knuckles, but the machine staggered back with sparks flying. The aliens in the crowd fell silent, stunned. A human had just forced back one of the arena beasts. His alien wife's eyes widened. For the first time, her smirk softened into something else, something close to awe. She whispered under her breath, though no one else could hear, "Yes, my human, push further." The sixth round had just begun, but already whispers spread through the stands. Maybe this human was not like the others. Maybe he was something more. And as the machines circled him again, the human stood straighter, despite the pain, because he knew the real test was only beginning. The wife's challenge. The machines had retreated back into the shadows, their heavy forms disappearing behind the walls of the arena. The human fell to one knee, his arms shaking, his breath ragged like fire in his lungs. The sand beneath him was wet with sweat, and his vision blurred at the edges. But before he could collapse fully, a strong hand caught his arm, pulling him back to his feet. It was her, his alien wife, tall and powerful, her golden armor glinting in the light, her silver hair flowing like liquid metal. She looked at him, not with pity, but with sharp eyes that cut like blades. "You still stand, human," she said in a low voice, only for him to hear. "But standing is not enough, not when my people watch." He swallowed hard, forcing his body to stay upright. I gave everything," he whispered, his voice hoarse. Her lips curled into a smile. Not kind, but fierce, the smile of a warrior queen testing her mate. "No, you gave much, but not everything," she replied. "You think this was the end, but it was only the beginning." The crowd above erupted into cheers and laughter. Some mocked him, shouting that the human was finished. Others urged her to replace him with a stronger alien mate. The voices stung, but the human clenched his fists tighter. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him fall. His wife turned to face the crowd, raising her arm for silence. Her voice rang across the arena, deep and commanding. "You see weakness in him," she declared, "but I see a man who does not run, even when broken." The crowd murmured at her words, their tones shifting from mockery to unease. Then she turned back to him, her gaze narrowing. "If you are to be my husband in truth, if you are to walk beside me as equal, then you will accept my challenge." His heart pounded in his chest. "What challenge?" he asked, though fear already coiled in his gut. Her smirk deepened, fierce and merciless. "You will face me," she said simply. The words froze the air. Even the crowd went silent, every alien watching with wide eyes. A human fighting against his alien wife, the fiercest warrior of her clan, was unthinkable. It was madness. It was cruelty. It was love, twisted into a trial of fire. "You can't mean," he began, but her hand pressed against his chest, silencing him. Her touch was hot, filled with power, and her eyes glowed brighter. "This is not about cruelty, my human," she said. "This is about proving to me, to them, and to yourself that you are not fragile. If you fall to me, they will never respect you. But if you stand against me, even broken, then no one will ever call you weak again." The human's legs trembled, not just from exhaustion, but from the weight of her words. He looked up at her, the woman he loved, the woman who had chosen him above her own kind. She could crush him in moments, break him with a single strike, but he also knew she would never forgive him if he refused. This was not only a fight, it was a test of his worth as her husband. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply. Memories flashed. Of Earth, of the quiet nights when they spoke under alien stars, of the moment she chose him in front of her people. He remembered the laughter in her voice when she called him stubborn. And he realized now that stubbornness was the only weapon he had left. His fists clenched again, weak but ready. He lifted his head and met her glowing eyes. "Then I'll face you," he said, his voice firm despite the pain. The crowd roared in disbelief, their voices shaking the stone walls. The alien wife smiled, slow and dangerous, her expression filled with both pride and hunger. "Good," she whispered. "Then let them watch, as my husband proves himself." She stepped back into the center of the arena, her long spear materializing in her hands, its blade glowing with alien light. She spun it once, the motion fluid and terrifying, before pointing it directly at him. The ground shook with the sound of the crowd chanting. The human's body screamed with pain, but his heart beat with fire. He walked forward, every step heavier than the last, until he stood across from her. For a moment, silence fell. Husband and wife, warrior and human, love and trial, stood face to face. Her lips parted, and she said softly, almost tenderly, "Do not hold back, or you dishonor me." Then her expression hardened again, sharp as a blade. "Come, human, show me if you're truly worthy to be mine." The human raised his fists, his arms trembling but steady. The air grew tense, every alien in the crowd holding their breath. And as the first strike was about to fall, he realized something. This was not just survival anymore. This was destiny, forged in pain, in love, and in defiance of the galaxy itself. The wife's challenge had begun. The crowd watches in suspense. The arena fell into silence. Every alien I was fixed on the human standing across from his wife. No one dared to blink. No one dared to breathe. For this was not just a fight. It was something far greater. The human's fists trembled, but his spirit did not. He looked small against her towering form, her spear glowing with deadly light. Yet something in his eyes made the crowd hesitate. It was not fear, it was not despair. It was defiance. The aliens whispered among themselves, their voices low but sharp. "He cannot fight her. He is already broken," one muttered. "Her strike will end it in seconds," another hissed. But a few leaned forward, watching closer. "There is something strange about this human," they whispered. "He has not fallen yet." The wife circled him slowly, her steps steady, her gaze never leaving his face. She spun her spear once, the metal humming with energy. She looked like a predator circling prey. But her smirk carried something else. Not mockery, not cruelty, but pride. The human shifted his weight, every muscle screaming. He knew she was stronger, faster, trained since childhood to fight and kill. But he also knew one truth. Humans did not stop when logic said they should. Humans pushed further when they had no strength left. She lunged first, the spear flashing like lightning. Gasps erupted from the crowd as the weapon cut through the air. The human barely moved in time, the blade slicing across his arm instead of his chest. Blood sprayed, hot and red against the pale sand. He stumbled, but he did not fall. The aliens roared, some cheering for her, some gasping in shock that he still stood. The human grit his teeth, lifting his fists again. Pain clouded his vision, but deep inside, fire burned brighter. He thought of Earth, of his people, of the stubborn blood that ran through his veins. And he thought of her, the woman he loved, the woman testing him now. The crowd leaned forward, every eye wide, every heart racing. This was no longer entertainment. It was something sacred. A human, fragile yet unbroken, standing against a warrior queen. It was a clash of two worlds, two hearts, two destinies. She swung again, faster this time. The spear's blade cut toward his side, but the human twisted, barely escaping. The weapon scraped his ribs, tearing flesh, but he did not scream. Instead, he stepped closer, inside her guard, and threw a punch at her shoulder. The blow landed, weak compared to her strength, but strong enough to make her stagger a step back. The crowd erupted in chaos. Some shouted in disbelief. "Impossible! A human cannot touch her." Others cheered wildly, their voices shaking the stone walls. They had never seen a human do such a thing. Her eyes widened for a moment, surprise flashing across her face. Then her smirk returned, sharper than ever. "Yes," she whispered, her voice low but proud. "That is the strength I chose." The human's knees wobbled, his chest rising and falling like a storm. He knew he was bleeding. He knew his body was near collapse. But the sound of the crowd, the roar of voices that once mocked him, now filled him with something new. It was not fear, not shame, but power. They were watching him, truly watching. The aliens whispered again. If he survives this, he will earn respect, one muttered. He may even change how we see humans. Another said softly. And somewhere in the higher stands, the elders of her clan sat in silence. Their ancient eyes locked on the human, measuring him with every breath he took. The fight was no longer just about him and his wife. It was about humanity itself. It was about proving that even the smallest spark could burn brighter than a star. She lunged again, her spear spinning like a storm. The human ducked, rolled, and staggered back to his feet. His blood painted the sand, but his eyes burned like fire. And when he raised his fists again, the crowd fell into stunned silence. He was not supposed to stand anymore. He was not supposed to fight anymore. Yet there he was, still facing her, still ready, still unbroken. For the first time, fear flickered in the eyes of the watching aliens. Not fear of his strength, but fear of what he represented. If one human could do this, what could an army of them achieve? And in that moment, as the arena trembled with shouts, the galaxy began to realize that humanity was not weak. The wife smiled again, her spear steady, her eyes glowing. Still standing, my human, she said, her voice carrying across the arena. Then show me more, show me everything. The crowd held its breath. The suspense was crushing, the energy electric, and as he stepped forward again, fists raised, blood dripping from his wounds. The aliens knew they were watching history being made. The crowd watched in suspense. The breaking point. The air inside the arena was heavy. The dust had not settled from the last exchange, yet the crowd leaned forward, hungry for what would happen next. The human's chest rose and fell like a hammer, striking an anvil, his breath ragged, his blood dripping onto the sand. Still, he stood, fists raised, facing the towering form of his wife. Her spear gleamed with alien light, but she did not strike right away. Instead, she studied him, her eyes sharp, her lips curved into the faintest smirk. She saw the tremor in his arms, the weakness in his knees, the thin line between survival and collapse. And yet, she also saw the fire in his eyes, a flame that refused to die. The crowd murmured louder now, voices overlapping. He should have fallen already, one alien said in disbelief. No human can endure this much, another muttered. But the elders in the highest seats stayed silent, their gazes unblinking. They were no longer watching a fight. They were watching a revelation. The wife raised her spear, her voice ringing out across the arena. This is the sixth trial, she declared. And here stands my husband, still breathing, still unbroken. The crowd roared, some in mockery, others in awe. Then she turned back to him, her expression harder, fiercer. But this is where many warriors, even of my kind, meet their breaking point. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched tighter. He knew she was right. His body was already beyond its limit. His muscles screamed with pain, his vision swam, his lungs burned like fire. Every step forward felt like lifting a mountain. But still he nodded. Then let me face it, he whispered. Her eyes gleamed with pride and danger. Very well, she said, her voice low. Come at me, human. She lunged, the spear slicing through the air like lightning. The human dodged, barely, the blade grazing his shoulder and sending fresh blood down his arm. He stumbled, but refused to fall. The crowd gasped, their voices rising in shock. Even wounded, he still moved, still resisted, still fought. But his body was weakening, every dodge slower, every strike weaker. The wife pressed harder, her attacks faster, sharper, relentless. Each strike like thunder, each clash shaking the ground. And the human's body bent under the storm. He blocked one strike with his forearm, pain shooting through his bones. He rolled under another, his ribs screaming with fire. At last, A heavy strike from the spear's shaft slammed into his chest. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs and sent him sprawling onto the sand. The arena went silent. The crowd stared down in awe, their hearts pounding. Was this the end? Had the human finally reached his breaking point? He lay on the ground, his chest heaving, blood running from his wounds. The sand felt cool beneath him, his body begging him to stay down. His ears rang with the chants of the crowd, the sound of his wife's footsteps approaching. Every part of him screamed for rest, for surrender, for sleep. But in the ringing silence of his mind, he remembered her words. If you fall to me, they will never respect you. And deeper still, he remembered Earth, the faces of his people, the stubborn spirit of humanity. The unspoken rule that no matter how far they were pushed, humans got back up. He groaned, his hands pressing against the sand. His arms shook, his legs trembled, but he forced himself upward, first to his knees, then slowly to his feet. The crowd erupted, their voices deafening. Even the mockers fell silent, unable to deny what they saw. The wife stopped mid-step, her eyes wide for a moment. Then her lips curved into a proud smile, fierce and dangerous. Yes, she whispered, her voice filled with fire. That is the man I chose. The human raised his fists again, though they trembled. Blood dripped down his face, but his eyes blazed like stars. He stood tall, against pain, against fear, against the weight of the galaxy watching. The arena shook with chants, some calling for his fall, others for his triumph. But all of them were united in awe. This was no longer about strength of body. It was about will, about defiance, about something inside him that no blade, no spear, no pain could break. This was the breaking point. But instead of breaking, the human turned it into fire. His wife lifted her spear again, her smirk sharpened into challenge. You rise again, human, she said, her voice echoing across the stands. Then I will push you further. The human's lips curled into a bloody smile. Push me, he rasped, his voice weak but steady, and I'll show you I don't break. The crowd erupted once more. The sound rolled like thunder through the alien city. And as the fight continued, every eye knew they were not watching a man fall. They were watching a human rise. The breaking point had arrived, but it did not destroy him. It defined him. The human surprise. The arena shook with noise. Every alien voice shouted, some in disbelief, some in awe. The human stood once more, battered, bleeding, his body shaking like a fragile branch in the storm. Yet his fists were raised, his eyes burning with a fire the galaxy had not seen before. His wife tilted her head, her silver hair falling across her sharp features. Her spear hummed with energy, glowing brighter. But her expression had shifted. She was no longer testing him, as if he were a weakling. She was watching him like he was a warrior. The crowd whispered in waves. No human should rise after that, one alien said. He should be dead. Another hissed. But in the higher seats, the clan elders leaned forward, their eyes glimmering. They had judged countless warriors, but never had they seen one like this. The wife lunged again, faster than before. The spear cut through the air, aiming for his chest. The human swayed sideways at the last second, the blade slicing only fabric. Gas erupted. He had dodged, not by luck, but with precision. Before the crowd could even react, the human stepped forward, his fist clenched tight, and with all the strength left in him, he struck at her ribs. The impact was small compared to her power, but the sound echoed like thunder. The warrior queen staggered a single step back. The arena froze in silence. A human had landed a clean blow on her. No alien husband had ever done so. No warrior had dared strike her in front of her clan. But this fragile man had done it. And instead of anger, her smirk widened into a fierce grin. Yes, she whispered, her voice low but proud. That is my husband. The crowd roared, a storm of voices crashing against the stone walls. Some shouted in disbelief. He touched her, he struck her. Others shouted with rising excitement. He may not win, but he refuses to kneel. The human's arms trembled as he stepped back. Pain flared through his ribs. His vision swam with shadows. But something inside him had shifted. For the first time, he felt the crowd's eyes not as knives mocking him, but as flames pushing him forward. They were beginning to see him, not as fragile prey, but as something else. His wife twirled her spear, her eyes glowing brighter. Her voice carried across the arena. Do you all see? This is why I chose him. Not because he is strongest, not because he is fastest, but because he refuses to stay down. The aliens murmured, their whispers spreading like fire. He is more than human, one muttered. He is different, another said. Perhaps, they thought, humans were not weak at all. The wife attacked again, the spear spinning like a storm. The human ducked, rolled, and stumbled back to his feet. Another strike came, and this time, instead of retreating, he stepped into it. His fist rose again, striking at her shoulder. The sound rang out, and the queen of warriors stepped back once more. The arena shook with shock. Twice now he had touched her. Twice he had proven he could endure. And each time, the crowd's respect grew sharper, heavier, undeniable. The human's lips curved into a weak, bloody smile. He could barely breathe, his body screamed for rest. But in his eyes burned defiance. He raised his voice, hoarse but steady. I am human, he rasped, and I do not break. The crowd fell silent, stunned into stillness. Even the elders straightened, their eyes narrowing with interest. They had heard warriors boast, they had heard kings command, but never had they heard such words from a man who looked so broken and yet stood so unbroken. His wife lowered her spear slightly, her eyes fixed on him. For a brief moment, pride softened her fierce smirk. In that moment, it was not warrior against warrior. It was wife watching husband, and she whispered, so only he could hear, "You are surprising even me." The human's chest heaved, his body nearly at its end, but the energy of the crowd, the pride in her eyes, filled him with something beyond strength. It was willpower, pure and endless. The weapon no one expected, the weapon that belonged only to humanity. The crowd erupted again, their voices booming across the city. They no longer saw him as prey. They no longer saw him as fragile. They saw him as a fighter, a flame, a force that could not be crushed. And so the legend of the human surprise was born. Not from power, not from speed, but from the refusal to fall. From fists that kept rising, from eyes that never dimmed. The galaxy would remember this moment, when a fragile human struck back and made even his alien wife stagger. The human surprise had begun, beyond limits. The arena trembled with noise. The chants of aliens echoed like thunder, rolling through the stone walls and shaking the ground beneath their feet. The human stood in the center, his body broken, his arms trembling, his breath shallow. Yet his fists were still raised, his eyes still burning, refusing to surrender. His wife lowered her spear for a moment, studying him. Her gaze was sharp, but beneath the fierceness there was pride. "You should not be standing," she said, her voice low, carrying across the arena. "No human should have survived this long." She tilted her head, silver hair catching the light. "And yet, here you are." The crowd murmured, their whispers like a storm. "He has lasted longer than warriors of our own," one alien said. "He defies the impossible," another muttered. For the first time, the mocking voices had vanished. Now only awe and disbelief filled the air. The human swayed, his vision swimming. He could feel the weight of his blood soaking into the sand. His muscles burned as if fire crawled through every vein. But inside, something deeper awakened. It was not strength of the body, it was strength of the soul. His wife raised her spear again, the glow brighter, fiercer. "Then let us see what lies beyond your limits," she said, her voice ringing like steel. "If you can endure this, then you are truly mine." The spear cut through the air, faster than before. The human barely dodged, the blade slicing across his side, leaving a burning line of blood. He staggered, but did not fall. Another strike came, slamming into the sand at his feet, the shockwave knocking him back. The crowd gasped, voices rising. But still, he rose again. Each strike was harder, faster, relentless. The wife pressed him to the very edge, her attacks a storm of fire and light. The human could barely breathe, his arms weak, his body screaming. And yet, each time he fell, he forced himself back up. Each time he staggered, he straightened his spine. The crowd's voices grew louder. "He cannot be stopped," they shouted. "He is beyond reason." Others cried. Even the elders, silent for so long, leaned forward in their seats, their ancient eyes gleaming with something rare, respect. The wife's strikes grew more furious, not in anger but in awe. Her smirk had changed into a grin of pride. She pushed him harder, demanding more. She wanted to see just how far he could go, and the human gave her everything. At last, a heavy strike from her spear caught his shoulder. The impact sent him crashing to the ground, his body rolling across the sand. Gasps filled the arena. Surely this was the end. Surely no man could rise after that. The human lay still for a moment, the world spinning around him. His chest rose and fell, weak and shallow. The cold sand pressed against his face, begging him to stay down. But then, somewhere deep inside, he heard her voice. Not the voice of his wife in the arena, but the voice he remembered in their quiet moments. The voice that had called him stubborn, the voice that had chosen him, the voice that believed in him. With a groan, he pressed his bloody hands into the sand. Slowly, painfully, he lifted himself up, first to his knees, then to his feet, swaying but standing. The crowd erupted, voices exploding like fire. The impossible had happened again. His wife's eyes widened, her smirk gone, replaced by something else. Her voice trembled, though she tried to hide it. "You still rise," she whispered. The human's lips curled into a broken smile, blood dripping from his mouth. "I told you," he rasped, his voice hoarse but steady. "I don't break." The crowd roared, their voices no longer mocking, no longer doubtful. They chanted as one, their voices shaking the heavens. "Human, human, human." The wife lowered her spear slowly, her gaze locked on him. In her eyes was something no one expected. Not just pride, not just respect, but love, burning brighter than ever before. She whispered, almost too softly for the crowd to hear, "You are beyond limits." The human straightened his back, standing tall though broken. And in that moment, he was no longer just a man. He was a symbol of a race that refused to die, refused to kneel, refused to be forgotten. The arena shook with voices, with history, with destiny. And as the human raised his fists one more time, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. Beyond limits, the legend of humanity began. The turning point. The arena was no longer just a battleground. It had become a place where legends were born. The alien crowd that once mocked the human now chanted his name, their voices shaking the skies. "Human, human, human," they roared, their tones filled with awe. The human stood, broken yet unyielding. Blood dripped from his wounds. His body screamed with pain, but his spirit stood taller than any warrior in the stands. His fists trembled in the air, his lips curved into a weak but defiant smile. He had gone beyond limits, and now he stood on the edge of something greater. His wife lowered her spear, her glowing eyes locked on him. The fierce smirk she once carried had softened into something rare. Pride, love, and respect all burned within her gaze. She raised her voice, echoing across the arena. "You see him now," she declared to her people. "This is my husband, the human who refuses to fall." The crowd erupted again, louder than thunder. But their cheers were not for her this time. They were for him, the fragile man who had survived where even their warriors had failed. He had turned their mockery into respect, their laughter into silence, their doubt into belief. The human staggered forward, his body swaying, but his head held high. He stood before his wife, breathing heavily, his eyes never leaving hers. "Have I proven myself?" he asked, his voice broken but steady. For a moment, the arena was silent, the world holding its breath. Her gaze softened further, her lips parting. "You have proven more than I ever dreamed," she whispered, her words for him alone. Then she raised her hand high, lifting his arm into the air. Her voice thundered like fire across the arena. "This is no weakling. This is no fragile being. This is my mate, my equal, my warrior." The crowd roared, their voices uniting in a storm. Even the elders who had remained silent stood slowly, their eyes glowing with approval. One spoke, his voice old but strong. "The human has endured beyond reason," he said. "He is worthy of respect." The human blinked, barely able to believe what he heard. Moments ago, he had been nothing to them, a fragile outsider mocked for daring to stand beside one of their kind. Now, he was lifted by their voices, carried by their respect. It was a turning point not only for him, but for all of humanity. His wife leaned closer, her hand brushing against his cheek. Her touch was gentle, in sharp contrast to the fierce warrior she had been moments ago. "You were mine before this trial," she whispered. "But now, you are ours, seen and accepted by my people." The human's chest swelled, not with pride, but with relief. Every moment of pain, every drop of blood, every breath he thought would be his last, it had all been worth it. He had not only proven himself to her, he had proven humanity itself. He had shown that willpower could rival strength, that love could fuel endurance, that stubbornness could inspire a galaxy. The arena lights dimmed as the trial ended. The machines returned to silence, the dust settling around them. But in the memory of every alien present, this day would never fade, for they had witnessed something they could not explain, something they could not deny. The human turned, his arm still raised by his wife. The crowd chanted again, their voices rolling like waves across the city. "Human, human, human." And in that chant was no mockery, no doubt, only respect. His wife smiled, fierce and proud. "You asked me once why I chose you," she whispered. "Now you see, it was not for your strength of body, but for your strength of spirit. And today, you have shown them all why I was right." The human smiled faintly, his body on the verge of collapse. But inside, his heart burned with fire. He had faced the impossible, and he had not only survived, he had changed everything. For himself, for her, for humanity. As the arena thundered with voices, as alien warriors bowed their heads in respect, the human realized this was more than victory. This was the turning point. The moment the galaxy stopped seeing humanity as fragile and started seeing them as unbreakable. The turning point had come, and the universe would never be the same.